I'm Hayes Hartwig. This is Bamboo, Vancouver's property management and investment podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Today, we have Matt from Vancouver Rent-it. He is our third longest one because we got a new guy, right?
Yes, that's
so
correct.
We do have a new guy, which we'll get him on our show soon. But anyways, welcome back to the show, Matt. We're going to go through some stats.
Awesome.
Yeah, man. What's been
Glad
going
to be
on?
back.
Things been going good? What's going on?
Yeah, the market's slowing, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. But yeah, just it's interesting always coming out of the hot summer months as a rental agent going into the winter because homeowners' expectations are obviously set in the summer, and then as you go into the winter, they change quite a lot. So that's always an interesting dynamic to balance.
Oh, absolutely. And it's funny you just mentioned about things slowing down. The second month in a row, the rent has actually gone down, which is a nice relief for a lot of people because rent in Vancouver is freaking expensive.
That's true, yeah. And it's funny how, the public, whether they're renters or homeowners, they don't always see what we see, right? So no. I talk to a lot of homeowners and tenants, and they're like, wow, the rent has just gone crazy. And they're correct. It did go up this year significantly, but they think that it's just going to keep going up and up and up. But in reality, like you just mentioned, like it has come down significantly for October and November.
Oh, absolutely.
But when you meet tenants, they don't always think that. They always just think that it's on the up and up and up and up forever.
Yeah. Which is, for a long time it has been up. I think we had like 6 months in a row or something that was just perpetually going up. So yeah. I feel the pain, right?
Mm-hmm.
That being said, the average rent for a one-bedroom unfurnished currently sits at $23.62, which is $44 less than October, but $45 more than last year, which that's actually not too bad, to be perfectly honest. You'd think that previous months, the difference was like 150 plus type of thing.
Yeah.
So,
and that average is obviously including which geographic areas?
Sorry, I was just drinking my coffee there, man. It's the Greater Vancouver area, like as a whole, right. Lower mainland, essentially, all the way out to Langley, that sort of thing. So
yeah, that makes sense. I would guess that like the downtown core of Vancouver is probably about those numbers, maybe like 10-15% higher.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And we'll go through like each sort of area, as it were. It's funny though, because like Peter had mentioned that it traditionally slows down in the winter a few shows ago. And here we are, slowing down. It's almost like we know what we're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Have you seen the same thing? Like, you've been doing this for a few years now, like.
Yeah, exactly.
Traditionally?
It's part of my spiel now. It's part of what I say to a lot of my clients is that history does repeat itself. And in the 6 years that I've been doing this now, it does slow every single autumn. So it is a cyclical norm in rentals. So it's not so in the future,
Mm-hmm.
I will definitely be expecting it to slow down, and it's something it's normal. It's human behavior. Mm-hmm. People like to move and be active in the summer, and people like to be more dormant in the winter, right?
Oh, absolutely. People are thinking about Christmas and stuff, not moving boxes.
Exactly.
Right. Exactly. They're thinking about wrapping boxes. So as you mentioned, the average price per square foot for all of the lower mainland combined is $3 per square foot. Vancouver, of course, is highest per square foot, 3.96. Burnaby number 2 is at $3.57, and New West is coming down, but it's at $3.44 now. Interesting enough, Coquitlam is the least expensive at $2.36, which is unusual because usually the further east you go, Langley and so on and so forth, it's most expensive. New West is still coming down. They just had a couple of new builds take possession, so that's obviously propping that up. Interestingly enough, it was last month at $5.19. So it's a big drop.
Potentially the same explanation can be used for Coquitlam as well, why it's low, because they had a huge influx of properties and therefore there's an oversupply and not as much demand, right? So the prices came down.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just kind of interesting to see how supply and demand does in fact affect real estate, given that nobody seems to admit that.
Yeah.
Very strange.
It's difficult to tell the demand as a tenant out there because you don't really know how many other people are searching for rentals at the exact time that you're searching for a rental.
Yeah, absolutely not, right? Like it's the ebb and flow, right?
Exactly.
That being said, with pricing, and you obviously have to have these conversations with owners and such, how do you sort of determine your price, and including things like factors of storage and parking, pets, this sort of thing? Like, give us a walkthrough on obviously you don't have to give away all your secrets, but how do you someone gives you a new property, how are you pricing this? What are you comparing to?
There's a couple different factors. The proper way to do it is with comparables. You always want to do an apples to apples or an oranges to oranges comparison, so to speak.
Yeah.
So making sure that you're comparing the home to similar properties with the variables that you just mentioned. Do they both have parking? Do they both have storage? Do they both have similar level of amenities or similar level of age of the building, and therefore quality of appliances, air conditioning, elevator speeds? All of these types of things will affect your comparables choice. So you can land in a ballpark number, and then you can obviously compare it with comparables directly in the neighborhood to see what you're priced at in the neighborhood once you've compared it to similar units in the general vicinity.
Yeah.
And then ultimately you use your experience and knowledge, right? At Vancouver Rent-it, we are very knowledgeable and practiced property managers. We've done hundreds and thousands of rentals all over the city. So we use our gut feeling. Sometimes two properties in the same building, although they're the same floor plan, would have significantly different rents. You could imagine unit 205, for example, on the second floor, potentially some trees that are blocking its light, potentially a lot of street noise, lower to the ground. Or you could imagine, rather than 205, you could imagine 2205. The exact same floor plan, but 22 floors higher. It's the same amount of square footage, but the rent will be significantly different because of the outlook, the sense of your environment and things like that. And ultimately, we will advise owners on all these little variables so that we're obviously trying to achieve the maximum rental price, but we need to advertise accurately, get the best qualified tenant for the best rental price. So it's a balance of all of those things.
Absolutely. And some owners every once in a while want to add and take away things. So they ask you sometimes, to put up this price with parking and this price without. And I personally think that's like kind of dirty. You know what I mean? That sort of, it just feels dirty. Like, what do you think about that? Like, should you put that up?
I understand why you say it's dirty, because it just means that you're kind of offering many different prices and you're willing to negotiate on a variety of different factors, whether it's parking included or storage included or whatever. The worst one is when people try to charge more for pets, which is obviously not legally allowed.
Yeah.
But to your point, what I basically think of that is it just shows that you're open to negotiation. It could be anything. You could be charging a slightly different price for a 6-month term, whereas the price is lower for a 12-month term. Or it could be parking, or it could be storage. What you're doing is you're telling everybody who's looking at your ad is, hey, we're open to negotiation. We could do a different term. We could do parking or storage or none or all of them. And you're just opening yourself to negotiation. And ultimately, I don't like to start that style of communication as a professional landlord, as a professional property manager. I want to try and advertise clearly what I'm looking for, and I want people to advertise to respond to my advertisement in a clear manner. And I generally find that it nets the best results for the tenant and for the owner. It's clear communication, and we're not opening ourselves up to negotiation, which can lead to other types of communication in the future.
Yeah, it's funny actually that you bring up about being a professional landlord and licensed and all this stuff. I had a phone call from a colleague, his client actually, and she's having difficulty with getting her deposit back. She's just bought a new place and so on and so forth. So I had he got his client to call me back, and she's having troubles with getting her deposit back. And so we started going through asking questions and stuff. And she's run into an unlicensed, well, at least I'm pretty sure that he's unlicensed property manager. And it's amazing for these tenants sometimes, because like they kind of just ran by a bunch of red flags, because I asked her some simple questions. And so we talked about like what his name was, and she doesn't have a last name. So I said, oh, well, have you called and talked to this guy? She said he never gave her his phone number. Like super big red flags, right? And so I asked about, did you use the RTB1, the standard issue government property for the to lease there? And she says yes. And looking at it after she like shows it to me and whatever, these are blank. So can you imagine signing a contract with just Matt?
Yeah.
That's it.
So
it's crazy.
Either A, the owner's trying to conceal their information, or maybe the owner is actually a tenant and they're subletting the property.
That might be a possibility. But yeah, it's basically don't sign a contract that isn't filled out.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what it ultimately
Unfortunately, Vancouver, we use antiquated rental systems to rent our properties out, like Craigslist. We've got very little oversight of our industry, and our prices are highly fluctuating and very manipulatable.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, it breeds a lot of scams. And it means there's a lot of fraudulent activity in Vancouver. And so absolutely, tenants should be aware. They should definitely do their due diligence. They should be definitely doing background as much due diligence and fact checking as possible when they're meeting a landlord, whether they're meeting a company, are they renting from Joe Smith in North Van, or are they renting from a big brokerage? Are they renting from a single person? Are they international? They need to know all this information. They need to have, I even had tenants reach out to me asking for my client's proof of home ownership.
Yeah, like a title search or something.
Which is actually quite, I was a little put off by it at first, but then I was like, you know what? Fair enough. They're doing their own due diligence. They just want to ensure that I am who I say I am, and that I have the right to even rent this property out that I have keys for. Because at the end of the day, I could also be a scam artist.
Absolutely.
So
it's funny because we just covered the show. Actually, the last show we just did was on how tenants can avoid getting scammed, and I brought up, get a title search, check IDs and stuff. I mean, we're checking yours. You should absolutely check ours.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I would not have any problem if a tenant asked me just to look at my driver's license to confirm my legal name, so that they could Google me and see our company and search me on LinkedIn.
Absolutely,
and I would do that for sure. Because like you said, I ask for the same thing from other people.
Yeah, and good for the goose, good for the gander, as it were, right? Gander is also a goose, just so you know. Just anyone's ever wondering about that, you can Google that. Anyways, so of most of the available rentals, 74% of them are apartments. So, I mean, any idiot can figure that. Look up. It's more apartments than houses. We're just straight out of lands, which is also causing the rental and housing crisis. We're out of land. So 2 beds are being the most common at 47%, with 1 bedrooms taking 37%, and of course everything else being the rest. So now, I see a lot of turnover for 1 bedrooms as well, which explains why it's sort of lower.
Yeah.
There. Do you see the same thing?
1 bedrooms just rent quicker, right?
Yeah.
2 bedrooms, you're dealing with higher rents. You're dealing with roommates who are joining incomes to afford rent. And there's just more single occupants who can afford a single occupant rent by themselves than there are single occupants that can afford 2 bedroom, or 2 people that are willing to join it together to try and afford a 2 bed. Sometimes those couples or partners or whatever will just rather move into a 1 bed so they can save all their pennies.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the demand for 2 beds is just not as strong as 1 beds. It's that simple.
Now, through the COVID and all that stuff, more people working at home, did you see an uptick on 2 bedrooms, or because more people working from home, right?
Or mainly just people moving out of studios into 1 beds rather than one. A little bit of from 1 to 2, but more junior studios to 1s, because juniors are just tiny. People are squished in 400 square feet, and they'd rather have 600.
Yeah, and that's reasonable.
It is totally reasonable.
But yeah, I noticed myself like an uptake on that. So for any investors listening, as Matt just touched in on, the 1 bedrooms seem to rent quicker, higher turnover, all that. So
yeah, exactly.
Maybe look
generally hire more qualified renters too. People are generally independent and higher income at that certain age of life when they're looking for those 1 bedroom properties. So it's just a safer gamble as an investor. If you're looking to buy a property, you're more likely to get qualified tenants. You're more likely to have your property be highly sought after in terms of demand. The rental income's affected the most too. Yeah,
absolutely. Now, there are some new rules coming in for Airbnb. It seems almost like Vancouver's starting to move towards just not having Airbnb kind of thing. Do you think that Airbnb is stressing the rental market, or do you think it's just a little bit more of flash than go? What are your thoughts on that?
I anticipated our phones to start ringing maybe a month or 2 ago when the news all came out, but honestly, they didn't.
Yeah,
they didn't. What I did see is some ridiculously overpriced rentals online.
Yeah, absolutely.
People expecting vacation style rent amounts. Basically just taking their Airbnb daily amount and timesing it by 30 and thinking they're going to get $8,000 for a standard 2-bed downtown. It's just like, insanity.
Smoking a bit of the crack, eh?
So, I mean, I saw a couple ads like that. Those people are just unaware of how the world works, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, I honestly don't know how even to talk.
Speaking of that, like, just turning over their Airbnb into this a regular rental, what are your thoughts on furnished versus unfurnished? Like, I personally think that furnished is kind of a high risk move because, I mean, anybody who's going to illegally run an Airbnb, you literally just gave them a turnkey operation. Like, they don't care, right?
Furnished rentals are tough because people treat furnished rentals like hotel rooms. Owners are quite attached to their furniture. Furniture is susceptible to wear and tear. Furnished properties are vacant for 1 to 3 months out of the year sometimes, and if it's during the winter, then you've lost 3 months of rent and you'll never earn that money back, even if you make 10% more on your furnished rental than unfurnished. So there's a lot of cons with furnished rentals.
Absolutely.
Especially for more long-term owners who kind of want no headaches and they just want to relax and have peace of mind and have some stability with their cash flow in terms paying off their mortgage. So furnished rentals are okay, but they're for people who are a lot more hands-on. And that's just something we don't do. So, Airbnbs can be profitable in select buildings where they were allowed and they were approved. But there's just been a huge flux of furnished properties that are overpriced. So in reality, it makes the unfurnished stuff look more desirable.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing with the furnished is that you've just added an extra piece to the board. You know what I mean? Like, your style is different from my style. So you may think that couch is awesome looking. I may think it's ugly as hell. So now not only do we have to find somebody who's ready and willing to pay the money, likes the unit itself, but also has to have the same taste as you. And that's, you're adding a lot here, right? So
exactly, yeah. So when I do furnished rentals in the past, I always tell clients that the decor, the furniture, the artwork, it just needs to be basically completely culturally ambiguous and age ambiguous as well. It needs to just be super generic. Like, you can't have anything tied to any,
anything.
It needs to just be like a vacation rental. You need to go in and just see a picture of the mountains on the wall. You can't have. I have done furnished rentals where people want to leave their family photos on the wall. It's like, what, you're going to rent your house out and leave a picture of your grandma on the wall? Like, that just doesn't work, right? Or I met a lady who wanted to leave all her books behind on a bookshelf, and they were nice books and it looked nice. The bookshelf was well put together. It was nice on the eyes, but then you actually look at the titles of all these books and they're all about very specific things to do with her life, right? And I'm just like, look, you can't leave all this behind. There's nobody going to come in here and read about, watercolor art paintings in France from 1950s. Anyway, so yes, you need to make your property very ambiguous. It needs to be anybody from any age and any culture needs to be able to come in and make it their home for a short period of time. And that's how you're going to get the best success with a furnished rental.
Yeah, absolutely. And I generally just say, just shy away from them if you can. And a lot of, especially I explain to owners all the time that if you like your furniture, don't leave it behind. It's not coming back the same way. People knock things over. I mean, hell, I spilled a glass of wine on my couch yesterday. So, if that was a furnished, I just wrecked your couch.
Yep. And the tough thing is that so to your point, you say, okay, well, I'm just going to put IKEA, but cheaper furniture. I'll go to IKEA, I'll go to Structube and put cheaper furniture in here. Yeah. But when you put your bunch of cheaper furniture in your furnished rental, well, then suddenly it doesn't show as nicely as it could, and then you think you might be able to get more rent money if you had fancier stuff in there.
Yeah.
You put fancier stuff in there and you get a red wine stain on your couch, and then you're like, oh,
Yeah.
So
now we've got a wrecked couch.
Exactly. So there's lots of headaches, lots of moving pieces, and generally just unfavorable results for owners in my experience.
Yeah, I'm in the same camp. I just figured unfurnish your shit. Simple as that.
Yeah.
That being said, with the expenses that have been going on, the top 5 most expensive cities are West Van being number 1, Vancouver proper number 2, North Van being number 3, White Rock number 4, and Markham, Ontario has finally come back. They've been here for 2 months now. I don't know what Markham is. I've never been there, but for some reason they keep on jumping in the top 5 every once in a while. They just pop up. So if anyone's listening who's from Markham, feel free to email us and tell us what's going on out there. It's a strange one. Now you work in North and West Van. Are you seeing higher rents over there as well? I mean, you work downtown as well, but like, does this seem accurate from the stats here? And I mean, you got boots on the ground, right?
Yes. Good question. North Vancouver used to be a little bit lower than downtown.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say a couple of years ago, a one bed downtown used to be $25.
Mm-hmm.
That same one bed in North Van would have been $23.50.
Really?
I'm not talking a lot of difference, but just a little bit. North Van used to be a little bit cheaper than downtown, but it's gone opposite.
Yeah.
North Van is almost more desirable than downtown now. When I have properties in North Van, the types of people that want to live in North Vancouver are generally much higher income, and they have a desire to be in one of the nicest places in town because you have access to the mountains and all that type of stuff. So, places in North Van are extremely high. They're desired. I get a lot of emails for them. I can quite easily achieve downtown prices, or if not higher than downtown, because people want that access to nature that Vancouver is famous for.
Now, does that switch? Because like Peter and I are, and Ken as well, like we all had talked about sort of the sun tax. So like around kits in the summer gets more expensive.
Yes.
Does that flip with North Van, do you think? Like as the winter comes, obviously the beaches are cold as hell and you don't want to be in, it's gray and gross. But if you're on the shore, you're thinking mountains, fresh snow, all this sort of trip. Do you think it switches in the winter, or does it just sort of
not really
flow? Not really?
Yeah, I don't think so. It's hard to tell. To tell. I'd have to. Yeah, I don't know. Because I do agree with you. I've never heard it being called a sun tax before, but you're totally right. Yeah. You have that one bedroom on Cornwall.
Yep.
And during the winter, would rent that little studio for $1,700. But if I rent it out on August 1, right across from Kitsilano Beach, I'll have people pay me $26 for that place.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it hops up.
Because as soon as you see the lifestyle you live when you're that close to the beach, like people are willing to pay a lot for it.
Yeah.
In North Van, I haven't exactly seen that, but the demand has gone up a lot.
Yeah.
There's very wealthy cultures that want to live in North Vancouver, and those people have a lot of money, and they're willing to pay. Yeah,
like it's funny. I'm picking up one in Deep Cove this week, actually, just meeting with the owner and whatnot. But I find it always, I get the mountain guys, like they're working at Seymour, and just like most of the people who are calling me are coming to Seymour. They're lift off, ski instructor, whatever it may be. They're working at the mountain, so it's kind of an interesting thing. So I was just wondering if it flips like that, because I always find that the people that I have, when I have one in Deep Cove or near the mountains on the North Shore, I get mountain people. So,
look, at the end of the day, I'm an example of that too. I moved back to the North Vancouver recently to be closer to the mountains, to be closer to nature, to be closer to my friends and family.
Yeah.
And I love North Vancouver. I think it offers what is most appealing about Vancouver, which is our access to nature and stuff like that. It's a little rainier over there because the mountains catch all the clouds, and so it gets a little rainier. But I think it's worth it. Yeah,
for sure. Now, the rent increase for 2024 is 3.5%. It's been the highest that we've had in a long time.
Yeah.
This is causing a lot of people to start claiming they want rent control and all this. All of a sudden, rents are going to go up, obviously, like 3.5. I mean, it's not astronomical, but it's more than it has been for a while. What are your thoughts on rent control? Like, is it a good idea?
In the past, when I've had tenants who are having struggles paying their rent and the owner has their hands tied because their expenses are not being covered, you can say rent control all you want. You can have rent increases being mandated by the city, but when the owner has their hands tied, they just sell their home.
Yeah, which is interesting.
So do I agree with rent control? Yes. Do I think that we should have all these rules? Yes. But I have situations where the owners is like, okay, fine, you won't agree to the rent increase. Okay, fine, you won't agree to, either an above 3.5 rent increase or a 3.5 rent increase. So the owner's like, well, I have to sell. Mm-hmm. And if the owner has to sell and they truly have to sell, they'll choose a price that the property will sell. And inevitably, the tenant's just going to have to move out anyway because the new homeowner is going to come along and probably serve 2 months notice for owner occupancy. Mm-hmm. So yes, I guess I'm kind of dancing all over the place. Ultimately, like, yes, rent control should be in there, but ultimately, if homeowners cannot afford their homes, they'll just sell it, and the net effect is the same.
Of course, so you'll end up off the market. You're paying higher rent at the next place.
You get kicked out of your place and put on the street.
Yeah, and then you'll be paying a higher rent anyways, obviously.
Because you're going to be re-entering the market and market rent.
Yeah.
So it's so tough. It's such a tough thing to handle in this job.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Which is a nice segue. Thank you, by the way. So that one of the things that a lot of owners are concerned about is bad tenants. And we had a fireside chat a while ago. I think you were out of town or whatever for it. We were talking about screening methods and all that. What are some of your go-to screening methods to make as best you can to make sure that you don't have a tenant that's going to cause you a headache and ultimately the landlord owner money?
Great question. It's not actually just the screening method. The screening method is fundamentally should be the same for a lot of people in this job. Mm-hmm. You check documentations, you're checking employment, you're checking cash flow, proof of savings, proof of home ownership, anything to indicate that these people have funds or cash flow to pay for the rent. Mm-hmm. That's the first part of it. The second part of it is a landlord or character reference, someone who's saying, they're a person of respect, person with morals, good neighbor, good, person of that community, those types of things. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, the other thing that I always weigh is my gut feeling.
Yeah.
If someone is kind, respectful, on time, their communication is good, all of those types of variables. And then going back to the very first piece is actually just setting the precedent with your advertising and the way that you communicate with potential inquiries that you're somebody who is professional and somebody that will follow the rules and the laws. And the way to do that is just with very simple and clear advertising and making sure that you present yourself as a professional. I haven't dealt with that many scammers, and I'm fairly confident it's because they're turned away from my very, very first email.
Yeah.
For example, they'll respond to an ad, say, hey, is this available? Hey, is this 2-bedroom available? And immediately from me, they'll receive a questionnaire. It's about 6 questions. It says, hey, who are you? What's your nature of occupation? What dates are you looking for and the duration of your tenancy? Do you have any pets, kids, or are you a smoker? And then the 5th or 6th question is, a more general question, because I like to have people open up to me, especially when I'm meeting strangers online. I'll say, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah.
And often the best people who are genuinely and sincerely looking for a home, they'll write you a nice, beautiful little story.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is so-and-so, and my wife is so-and-so, and we have a 2-year-old daughter and a dog named whatever, and I'm looking for July 1st for a 12-month lease, and I work at so-and-so company, and they'll tell you all the nice details that you want to know as a landlord. But sometimes I send those emails out and I don't get any responses ever.
Yeah, especially on Facebook Marketplace. I have so many owners that want me to put their stuff on Facebook Marketplace, and it's just
pointless.
You get a lot of people inquiring, and then they ghost you, and it's like they're not strong.
They're not strong leads, and maybe one of them was actually a scammer. Maybe one of them was actually a really horrible person who was just immediately put off by your questionnaire.
Yeah,
because they see those questions, they're like, okay, I can't screw this guy over. I can't have my way with this guy because he's already like vetting me.
Yeah,
from the very first message, I'm already vetting them.
Yeah,
who are you? What's your nature of employment? Can you even write me a concise message responding to this with punctuation, with your name, with a period at the end of your sentence? If you can't even respond to my 5 or 6 questions in a nice, eloquent way, I'm not even going to respond to you.
Wow, because that's a pretty heavy hand, man.
Well, I mean, look, if you can't even write something nice to me and you want to rent a $2 million home from me, but you can't even string together a couple sentences, then it's just it's just probably not going to work, right?
Yeah, fair enough, right?
So the tenants out there, you got to put your best foot forward when you're applying for a rental property. It's like applying for a job. You have to put your best foot forward. You're looking to convince somebody to give you the keys for $1 million property. So,
which is funny with the vetting that we're talking about. Live.rent put up some stats this month, and the users there are paying over 50% of their money that they make to rent.
Yes.
Is that what you're seeing as well? Like that seems like a lot of money
for young people in Vancouver. Young people, I'm going to call it under 30 years of age. The maximum that I try to do is about 60%.
Really? That's pretty high.
It's high, but it's just the nature of living in Vancouver.
Yeah, you're talking like Vancouver proper, like
Correct.
downtown.
Yes.
Okay.
Like I've got, for example, 1 bedrooms downtown that are about 600 square feet, so big enough for 2 people to fit in, and younger people, hardworking, good young people of Vancouver, well educated, and but their combined income, one person makes $50K a year, the other makes $60K a year. That's $110,000.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good money. I'm 23 years old, 24. That's not bad money, right?
Yep.
But then, if you want to live in something that's $3,000 a month, or I guess that's actually a bad example, but more luxury 2 bedrooms. There are frequently people who are spending 50 to 60%.
Yeah.
I don't have a calculator in front of me right now. I apologize.
But
no, that 60% is the threshold that I do.
Okay.
For younger people, I like to keep it at 40 or 50 or lower.
Yeah.
But 60 is my threshold, and that's just the nature of Vancouver because it's so expensive here.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you had touched on earlier that some owners want to charge more for having pets. And what are your thoughts? Like certain places, for instance, back east in Toronto, you can't not rent to somebody because of a pet. They haven't brought that in here, but some people are trying to push for that. What are your thoughts? Do you think that pets should be like mandatory, or people should have the decision on it? Like, what are your thoughts on pets or no pets type of thing?
I think that, that's a tough one. I have seen damages from pets.
Absolutely.
I have felt clients who have been burned from having tenants who are irresponsible pet owners whose pets do a lot of damage.
Yeah.
On the flip side, I'm a pet owner and I love my dog, and I have a lot of very good tenants who have pets, and they're awesome tenants because they're animal lovers and they're just generally caring people, and they're responsible because they have to take care of their dog, and they just are great tenants. So it's such a hard thing to say. There's no black and white. Ultimately, I do think there should be a pet deposit because pets can cause damage, and I think it's fair to ask for that, especially if it's refundable.
Yep.
I like to open up all my rentals to pet owners. We open ourselves to more qualified tenants. We're receiving another half a month's rent as a pet deposit, which can kind of give us a little bit more security should something go wrong. And then ultimately, pet renters have less to choose from. So if you want to just set your price a little bit higher because it's a pet's okay rental, then just do that. But don't separate your prices. Don't say, A and B. You can't, though. A, it's illegal. I've had owners ask me for that. But B, if you're going to do that, just put the price higher to begin with, generally.
Yeah.
And pet owners will pay that.
It's funny that you brought up doing illegal things. I just dealt with this past week, and we got a bad review over it for being unprofessional because they're wanting us to do illegal stuff. When you have to deal with somebody who's trying to do something illegal, how do you handle this? Like, what's your way? What's your method?
It's tough. Ultimately, just polite and respectful education, I guess. Just try to explain that we're licensed and we have to follow the laws and the rules that are set out by the city of Vancouver, and ultimately just explain and try to come to an agreement or a solution that could potentially make the client feel like what they're trying to get across to the tenant is understood and heard, but do it in a way that's semi-legally binding, or do it in a way where they just feel like the person is in agreement. It could just be verbal. Sometimes I have clients who they just wanted to hear from them, like, yes, I agree, I'm not going to do that. It doesn't actually have to be in writing. So it's tough. It's tough. It's about finding a middle ground.
Yeah.
It's about educating and making sure that it's respectful and showing people like it might not end favorably for them anyway if they write into a clause that's not legally binding, right? It could come and bite them in the butt in the future, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you and RTB, you're going to get your ass handed to you with overstepping rules. It's not right. I just find that you sometimes run into some owners that almost want to hire you for doing like the wet work. If they want to hire you on, get you to do their dirty work, and then they're going to leave your ass out to dry when it comes home, right? So, yeah, it's just interesting, and you run into this in this industry a couple of times, and I guess ultimately, I think anybody who is going to be thinking about hiring a licensed property manager has to understand that from our license, we have to follow the rules. If we don't, we will lose our license, and it's not worth the 8% management for that, or the one-time hit for placement, because it's usually a placement that's trying to do that, and ultimately it's just a dickhead move. So I guess if you're a landlord and you're thinking about hiring a property manager, don't hire us to do your nonsense dirty work, is what it comes down to. We have to be fair to a tenant. They're already dealing with insane prices. Putting undue hardship on top of that, it's unethical, straight up. Yep. It is. So, yeah, this is interesting. I just wanted to sort of see where you touch on that. We won't name names, of course, but I'm sure anyone can figure that one out. Interesting enough as well. Now, we mentioned Peter earlier. His brothers just joined our company. We got a new PM. A lot of people who are listening to our show are new or becoming landlords, do it yourself. What are a couple tips that you would give that you learned, whether it be the hard way or not? If you're a do-it-yourself landlord or a new PM, what advice would you give? What are a couple pieces that'll make you sleep at night?
Read the residential tenancy agreement. Read the whole thing. Read the whole thing from the very top to the very bottom. Mm-hmm. And then go onto the gov.bc website and look at all the mandatory forms that they give you and know what those forms accomplish. Mm. And that's the backbone of our job. We can talk about all these other things, advertising and marketing and all these other things, but ultimately our job is to sign legally binding contracts between ourselves or landlords and renters. Mm-hmm. And so you need to know what the Residential Tenancy Act says. Absolutely. If you don't know what it says, how are you supposed to be an advisor for signing that document?
Yeah.
So for any landlord that's looking to rent their property out by themselves, read the Residential Tenancy Agreement. The lease agreement that you sign with your tenant is based on the Residential Tenancy Agreement. Mm-hmm. The Residential Tenancy Agreement takes precedent over any illegally binding clauses that you put. So whatever you could, I agree to give my second daughter away as the second month of rent. You can write whatever you want. The Residential Tenancy Act will take precedent, and ultimately that is enforced at the Residential Tenancy Branch if you go to arbitration. So that's where the buck stops.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you need to know what the Residential Tenancy Act says, because that is what you are getting two people to agree to.
Absolutely. I mean, it specifically says in the Act that you cannot contract out part of the Act.
Exactly.
It specifically says that.
Exactly.
So, going back to the numbnuts that we were dealing with prior that wanted us to do illegal stuff, I explained that to him, know. Yeah. We can't contract. We're going to lose. Yeah. Right? So it's a great piece of advice to follow the rules, basically. Yeah. That's what everyone's going to do. The thing too as well is that the Act is pretty straightforward. So as long as you follow the rules, if you end up at the RTB doing arbitration, if they see that you followed the rules, you'll be fine.
Yeah. Right? The BC government and the city of Vancouver, they try to make it as clear as possible.
Yeah.
They try to make it easy. You go on the gov.bc website, the website couldn't be clearer. Things are bolded and highlighted and underlined. Click here. They really do make it easy for you to follow along the steps so that everybody's playing by the same rules.
Yeah, not to mention they have information officers. That's what they're called. Yeah. So if you don't understand something or you're wondering, ask.
Yeah.
That's what they're there for.
Yeah.
And then I do want to give out another tip, though. When you do talk to the information officers, make sure that you get their name and ID. Basically, they all have essentially a badge number. It will help you later on, because if you do something and then you end up in arbitration, you can say Julie or Joe number 5995 said to do this. Right? That's why I did that. Mm-hmm. So that way the arbitrator they'll have to go and talk to Julie or Joe and say, why'd you tell them that if it was wrong or whatever it may be, right? Yeah. At least it gives you some credence as to why you did what you did.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, it's just a couple of tips for the new people who are coming in there, and hopefully the new guys listen to our show right now, eh? Well, I've run out of topics to go through. Do you got anything to add, man?
No, thanks for having me. Just another day and doing rentals today, dealing with speculation taxes and getting places rented. So I got to get back to my phone, back to my email box, and keep things going here.
Wicked. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show. I really appreciate. If people are trying to get a hold of you for doing the taxes, I guess, or anything to do with property management, how do we find you in it?
Matt at VancouverRent-it.com. You can search Vancouver Rent-it and find all of our contact information on our website.
Great. Yeah, I'll put your contact in the description below. So thank you very much for joining us today. And thanks if you made it this far. We really appreciate you listening to our show. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with the news and goings-ons in the Vancouver and Greater Vancouver rental market. My name is Hayes. This has been Bamboo, Vancouver Property Management and Investment Podcast.